Well, welcome to another episode of the Leadership Press podcast, where we as leaders see pressure as a privilege because it's in the pressing that oil is produced, that purpose is revealed. My name is Mike Z. Happy June, everybody. Thank you so much for checking us out. Today, I hope that wherever you're at, man, you're having better weather. I don't know what happened with May, but I felt like we had so much rain and gloom. We went on like a 9-day stretch of that, but finally the sun is out and the weather is gorgeous and beautiful here in Northern Virginia. And so I hope that you're able to get outside if the weather's nice. Hope that you're staying healthy, staying fit, caring for our physical bodies, so important, especially as leaders. And a couple of things before we get into the episode for today. I want to remind you that if you ever check the show notes, so wherever you're watching, whether it be YouTube or Spotify or wherever else, man, there's a link in there for you to submit questions. So if you ever have a question regarding leadership, I want to encourage you to check that out. Also, man, if today's episode or another episode ever encourages you, it means so much to me that you would share this with somebody to just kind of help spread the word, just hoping that this can help empower and encourage more and more leaders. And so if you find this encouraging, would love you to send this to another leader that you think would have an impact on. But in this month's episode of the Leadership Press, I have the opportunity to sit down with a longtime ministry leader. She's a coach. She is the care and counseling director at our church, and her name is Brenda Boose. And we have a very deep, honest conversation around adversity, around trust, around healing. She shares a good bit of her own personal story. And I know that this is going to encourage you. And so if you're someone who maybe right now, or maybe you felt in the past, if you've ever been overwhelmed, and I think we've all kind of wrestled with that, or, like that feeling of like you don't have what it takes, or imposter syndrome, or even if you've felt underqualified, or maybe even, disqualified because of challenges that you've experienced or things that you've been through in the past. Well, I believe that what Brenda has to share with us in this episode is really going to encourage you. And you may even find out that you're stronger than you realize. Come on, let's press in together. Well, today is very exciting because I get to sit down with someone that I've had the privilege of serving alongside for over 20 years. She is one of those people where I feel like leadership has not simply just been like learned in a classroom or through titles. It has been forged in the fire of real life, of real adversity, deep faith. She's a close friend of mine. She is a confidant of mine. And not only that, she serves as a coach, as a care and counseling director here in Northern Virginia. And through her coaching work, she helps women cultivate healthy trust, especially self-trust, so that they can live with confidence, clarity, purpose. But beyond what she does, I'm really excited for you to hear who she is. And I'm talking about none other than the amazing Brenda Boose. Brenda Boose, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so honestly honored to be in this space with you.
So grateful to have you joining us today. I know you are, we always say it with our team, you are a wealth of wisdom. And anytime that you share or speak, man, people listen. And so I'm excited for our community to just get to hear from you today. And so maybe like there might be people watching this today or listening who don't know who you are. And I know I gave kind of a formal introduction there, But I guess maybe if you want to introduce yourself, or how would you describe who you are, and maybe the kind of work that you do, just the kind of work that God has called you to. Just an introduction would be great.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Mike. Um, the work that I do is work that I love very, very much. I think that God has called me through my stories in my life. You mentioned that I have this background that is very storied. So the woman I feel like I am today was really forged through significant seasons in my life, and it has brought me to a place where I feel like I can use it in leadership and use it in my coaching, through childhood, through marriage, through motherhood, and really through a combination of grief and loss in my life. Thinking back and looking back on maybe how I got here today, I was adopted and into a home where my faith foundation really began. And my mother loved the Lord deeply. And every morning I would spend time watching her with God and in her Bible and in prayer before her whole day began. And watching as her relationship with God became one of the greatest anchors in my life. And at the same time, I also had a very abusive father, a very unsafe environment. It was a combination of things that our entire family experienced at his hands in different forms. Those things created in me a deep fear, a low self-worth, many mental strongholds that have really followed me for years. But even through that, I learned something very important very early, which I think was very foundational for me, is that God is trustworthy and the Holy Spirit is a friend. So yeah, I each one of those formed me differently, though.
Yeah. I mean, as much as you're willing to share, that was one of the kind of the first things I was going to inquire about, because you are someone who I know, has walked through a lot of adversity. But, from my vantage point, you've always carried yourself with so much grace and so much strength. And I think that's one of the reasons why, really wanted to have this conversation on here too, is because I think there are so many leaders and just people, who are trying to live their lives, leaders who are trying to lead, and yet they are, fighting private battles, carrying a lot on the inside. And so oftentimes, we look at the exterior and people see strength, but they don't see the thing that it took to develop that strength, like what it took to get me here, right? And so as you're looking back and you are talking about, I guess, some of these, key experiences, I guess if you want to share a little more, I guess, about how those things have formed you and influenced you as a woman, as a leader, to where it's brought you today.
Yeah, that's a great question. Adversity taught me things that comfort never could. Because adversity forced me into a dependence in God in ways that I never would have chosen on my own. Some of that, came through being a mother, and my second born was born with autism. A lot of people know who Brady is, but maybe a lot of people don't. But there were things that I had to learn very early on where, in the light of adversity, I had to learn to be emotionally honest. And that was really difficult. Adversity taught me strength, and that it isn't pretending that you're okay. It's bringing your real self before God, which is what he wants from us.
Yeah.
It taught me a true understanding for those who have carried some of the same experiences. Those mental strongholds I've mentioned earlier were a real battle for me. anxiety and depression became very real parts of my journey. And I had to learn how to take those thoughts captive with God's truth, not perfectly, but consistently. And I had a lot of my own rigidity and defensiveness that has been a protective mechanism for me in my life that God has had to work on in me. But adversity also exposed areas of my life that I wanted to control. Most of us spend a good amount of time mentally and emotionally trying to figure out how to control areas of our lives that seem like they're going out of control. And but God never intended for us to have control over them, if you know what I mean. I've had to learn how to continue to surrender those. So part of that was having my son touched with autism. Part of that was having a marriage that was wonderful until it wasn't, until my husband had started to really struggle. So there are many, many pieces, along with my childhood, that God has wrapped all up into this experience for me in this life that has formed who I am, and the adversity that I've gone through, I think, is turned into one of my superpowers.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. You mentioned your boys who now are, men
They are.
and two incredible men. And, the majority of which you've had to raise as a single mom. And, you mentioned, Brady and his disability, which I know has brought both, beauty and challenge, I'm
Yes.
sure.
Yes.
And I love your boys so much. They bring so much light everywhere that they go. Both of them do. And I guess, you're sharing some of these challenges, and I guess I'm curious, what, I don't know, maybe like what did motherhood teach you about leadership? It's I'm sure you've been through a lot, but any lessons learned or any insights to share with that?
Yeah. Motherhood, has been my greatest joy and privilege that God has ever given me. It's taught me that leadership is also a privilege, and it's deeply relational, I think, and less about control and more about empathy and consistency and stewardship as a leader. It's also taught me that leadership often looks faithful long before it looks successful.
Wow, that's good.
Because I've really had to learn along the way. I've made, mistakes in leadership, learning
Yeah.
over the years.
Yeah.
So in raising my two boys, especially through seasons for me that were seasons of confusion and loss and financial pressure, even being a single mom, taught me that people don't need perfection from a leader. I think they need presence and trust.
That's great.
I didn't see it at the time, Mike, but some of my greatest, I think, leadership development happened while I was emotionally exhausted and quietly trying to survive. I didn't feel strong, but God continues to teach me that faithfulness matters more than appearances. And honestly, my sons shaped me into a more compassionate leader because they taught me how differently people experience the world if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that would be the same for every leader that you have
Hmm.
that's under your care and your leadership. So, yeah,
Yeah. Gosh, there's so much in there that you just said. I feel like if you're listening to this, you need to go back and re-listen to that. I mean, especially, if you are, I mean, parenthood can be exhausting. And so, if you are
yeah,
someone who's a parent right now or a leader or whatever, and it's just that like, those moments of like feeling stretched thin, I love how you just said about, it often looks more first like faithfulness before it looks like success.
yeah,
And that it's not about perfection, but about simply just presence. And, those expectations that we put on ourselves, of course, wanting to
yes,
be perfect, wanting to be the best for our kids, for those that we lead. But oftentimes, just simply being present and being faithful is the thing that's most needed in those moments and in those situations. So I think that's so profound, so important for us to hear, and the importance of whether it's your kids or your team, knowing them individually,
yeah,
how they're wired, how they respond, what their needs are, and that's so important too. That it's not a copy paste or a one size fits all.
exactly.
Gosh, especially with kids, the moment you think you have something figured out with one, another one comes along and it's completely different, whole new ball game.
Completely. Yes.
And so, one of the things I wanted to, I guess, talk about, ask you about, is
Mhm.
around the idea of trust. I know
Yeah,
trust is kind of a big focus of your work and who you
it
are,
is.
and not just and trust is so important in leadership, and not just trusting others, but really learning to trust ourselves in a healthy way. And I think that is such an important conversation for leaders. And so I guess like starting with that,
Yeah.
I guess maybe how or why has trust become such a central part of like your work and what you do?
Yeah, I think because of my story, because of the areas of my life where I feel God allowed
Mm,
circumstances for me to try to figure out how to understand. And I had to learn to really trust Him with it. So when we talk about self trust,
hmm.
I'm not, talking about elevating ourselves above God or becoming self dependent, a part of God or the Holy Spirit,
Hmm.
who Jesus left here for us on the earth to be our friend and our helper. I'm talking about learning to trust who God says that we are instead of our fears,
Mm,
insecurities, our trauma, shame,
mm,
or unmet needs that can often start suggesting to us who we are. I
hmm.
think that many operate from, wounded places in their lives, challenges that we're all going to go through
Yeah.
that cause us to question what God is really doing in our lives,
Mm,
whether those challenges are based in fear, or even in love or worth or belonging or
mhm,
purpose. For some, if those questions, really go unaddressed, they can become those mental strongholds that I was talking about that quietly
mm,
attach themselves to our identity.
mhm,
And then the enemy loves to take those and repeat lies to us until we feel that they are true
mm,
and we begin living them out in our day to day lives and in our relationships.
mm,
What I love about coaching is helping people slow down long enough to recognize those patterns and reconnect them with the
yeah.
truth from God's word until it
Yeah.
becomes stronger and louder than what we're telling ourselves.
Yeah.
And because our thoughts can be completely transformed by the power and presence of Jesus in our life.
Yeah.
we get to choose to have no distance between us and Jesus and all that he has purposed for us. So to me, self-trust is about, starting to build or rebuilding that trust with God. And then for me, with my story, then, learning to walk in agreement and obedience with his word and who he has called me to be. And that's always been an ongoing process and probably will,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
for the rest of my days.
Man, I feel like I don't know if this is as you meet with people, I guess why is it so challenging for people to trust themselves, or like, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. Just why is it like, I feel like at times it's easier to believe the lie
It is.
than it is to trust the voice of God, and the truth that's spoken. I don't know. Why do you think that is?
Oh, I think because it requires faith that hasn't developed yet. And a lot of people, and believing in the things that we cannot see, right? And knowing that, God is really sovereign. But I think people have to grow in those things.
Yeah.
And I think that, it takes time.
Yeah.
This life can be very hurtful and very painful and very challenging.
Yeah.
So when those thoughts just start to overcome us, we believe them, and then we feel them. When they come to be something that they feel and they lie in our bodies, then I don't know, we trust it more in what we, like I mentioned a little bit before, what we can control or what we think we can try to control, versus yielding and surrendering the process to God. And understanding that he will move, and he's always working. He's there working, but we got to trust him for it. Right.
Yeah. Because trust is so valuable, and I'm sure in everyone's life to some extent, we've all experienced broken trust.
Yeah.
But it's that much harder when it's a repeated broken trust,
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, where do you begin in trying to rebuild self-trust, I guess, in a healthy, like God honoring way? Are there any practical steps to take?
They come in baby steps.
Yeah. I think that's important, that it's not an overnight.
Absolutely.
thing.
It comes in baby steps.
Yeah.
And, when I'm working on coaching, we're working on steps from people where we push them out into the discomfort. You know what I mean?
We love that.
Yeah. But that's really what it is, because you don't get there really any other way, especially if trust has been broken, but to step into the uncomfortable and to be vulnerable. We're handing parts of ourselves over to either processes or people or relationships that have been hurt along the way. And we can't do it without doing that also.
Yeah.
But I think it also is about a good level of having, some boundaries in place too.
Yeah.
And really learning some healthy boundaries along the way. So it's a combination of what works best for a person, what feels good for them, but also pushing them a little bit to that uncomfortable place.
Yeah, I think that's important to note, that there's not a, quick fix, to this, a Band-Aid. And, it really is kind of, there's no going around it. You kind of have to go through it. But with that caveat of, you can do this calculated and in a healthy way with help. You
Yes,
know, it doesn't have to be
exactly.
something that people have to uh, figure out on their own. So I think
Right.
that's so important. And you know, I guess I tend to be. I'm sure I don't know if there's other leaders listening like this, but you know, have a tendency to kind of just like keep going and just push through, push through
Yeah.
everything. You know, talking about whether it be emotional or physical
Mm.
signals, you know, that our body is telling us. I guess what would you say to a leader who's hearing this right now and is almost like, well, I don't have time to sit and process. I don't have time to like rebuild this. I don't, you know, I just got to get on to the next thing. I got to keep going. You know, just got to move forward, I guess. What would you say to a leader who's maybe wrestling with that right now of like, yeah, that's nice, but I just don't have time to do that.
I would probably tell them the most gentlest of ways that, that isn't going to serve them well. And that end up probably will not end up really being something that sustains them, right?
Yeah.
We've got to take the time to slow down. We got to take the time to invest, and we've got to take the time to look at how God is speaking to us in the things that we're carrying, right? I think that's again where some of the strength comes along the way. People can end up feeling like really weak, and that they're not, strong in their leadership. And I would say that I know people who have quietly kept showing up while carrying pain that nobody else could see, right?
Yeah.
I believe strength is often built very slowly and very privately, actually. Yeah, some of the holiest seasons, I think, of my life were seasons where I felt emotionally exhausted, very uncertain, holding all that stuff in, barely holding things together.
Yeah.
Yet, I would tell that leader in that small little word of yet, God was still working, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's
yeah.
great. Yeah. I would love to talk a little more about that too. I know, you yourself have obviously experienced so much, but you've also, you've walked with others, with so many people through their own challenging and difficult
Yeah.
seasons. And um, I guess in that, with that idea, I guess in the context of like leadership, how do how do we I don't know, I guess as leaders, like I'm sure there are like if we have people on our teams who are walking through their challenging seasons, I guess
Mhm.
is there any insight for like what do those team members, what do those people need from us as their leaders? Like
Mm.
how can I be compassionate towards that without like bearing the responsibility that like I've got to fix everything for them? Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
it does. Yeah. I think one of my greatest lessons I've learned over the years in ministry and in coaching, counseling, training is that God never called us to fix people. That's really the sacred work of the Holy Spirit and obedience in an individual's life.
Yeah.
But we are called to love and value people, walk beside them, offer wisdom, pray with them, maybe even aid and explore areas that we can support them in when they're going through their challenges, pointing them to Jesus.
Yeah.
But it's really a slippery slope if we think that we should take on the responsibility for even another person's transformation. When we see things, playing out, we want to have a very, very, very gentle and supportive approach to those things,
Yeah.
because many of us, care deeply,
Yeah.
and then accidentally begin carrying burdens that were never ours to hold. If that makes sense.
Yeah, of
I
course.
really feel like healthy leadership requires, again, compassion with boundaries, empathy without enmeshment, right? Where you're just enmeshing yourself in their presence, and then presence without any level of like control of
Yeah.
the process in their life.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's so helpful. And I feel like it'd be good to, and that's so insightful for the person who is leading others, and maybe leading a team. But I think it'd be good to to maybe flip the narrative, or maybe place a mirror, and now from the perspective of me myself, of leading myself. One of the things, the phrases, I guess, or the idea I've heard you share is around like being your own strongest advocate.
Yeah.
What does that mean? What does it mean to become your own strongest? So not expecting, right, my leader or the person to be advocating for, but for me myself to become my own strongest advocate.
Yeah. I think that it means remembering that your pain does not make you unusable. Your challenging times do not make you unusable in God's eyes. Your struggle does not mean that God is ever abandoning you. He's always with you, and your story is still unfolding. If I can look back, over the decades of watching God move through joyful times and then deeply difficult times, I can look back and see and testify that God wastes nothing that we are willing to surrender to Him.
Yeah.
Not abuse, not grief, not loss, not fear, not leadership insecurity,
Yeah.
Not heartbreak, not any of it. So it's knowing that we are, always a work in progress, I think, in our development and what He's called us to. I think that He's used all of those things in my life to shape purpose in me. And you know this, Mike, that I feel, blessed and honored by that. And not because, life was easy, but because God is so good, really, and better than what I deserve. So advocating for me is being very, very in tune to my spiritual rhythms and my disciplines and my connecting and my growing. I always have to be immersed in those things. There is not a time that I shouldn't be growing more and leaning in, because I think that there's always another corner I'm going around and God has something new to teach me. And I don't know that there's ever been that time, that He hasn't. But again, it's been a learning curve, but a good one.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. You mentioned healthy boundaries. I guess, are there any signs, or how does either, from either end, a leader, team member, vice versa, relationship, I guess, Like, how do you know when a boundary is needed for myself or for the other person? How do I, how do I identify that?
Yeah, I think when you are getting so emotionally enmeshed,
Mm,
that's what I was meaning a little bit earlier when we are trying to run even and control things.
hmm.
I mean, one of the things that we want to do and identify, develop, and empower leaders here at the church is for the leader to feel like they can get in and lead.
Yeah.
We are there as support
Yeah.
and we are in the wings of things. But if we're
Hmm.
in there and we're trying to micromanage,
Hmm.
or we're trying to just oversee every step of everything, we're not allowing God to work in their life and grow them into the leader that He's calling them to be,
Yeah.
right? So I
Yeah.
think it's knowing that we need to put in a little bit of a boundary there and watch what God can do, and then be there in the wings for the leader,
Hmm.
and be that touch point for them when they
Yeah.
need guidance, but
Yeah.
also giving them the tools too of how to learn to grow if they want to grow. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Yeah, I think that's the thing. If we feel like we're in there controlling it all, then
Hmm.
we're not allowing them to lead.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Having that boundary for ourselves of, again, whether it be a team member or even with parenthood, kind of, there are moments
yeah,
where you got to let them, almost let them fall, right?
yep,
Let them
yeah,
have those
exactly.
experiences, and the freedom to have that. I guess on the other side of it, though, what do you do? What do you say to someone who maybe they're someone who the boundary isn't that they want more freedom to do whatever, but the boundary is like, I don't know how to say no. So they keep,
Oh,
it's almost like feeling like they need to do everything, or,
yeah.
what is maybe a boundary that person needs, or direction that person needs.
Yeah, that falls into a lot of like people pleasing
Yeah.
and trying to please in order to get the leader maybe to a place that they'd want them to grow. It's again, it's the same thing. If we are stepping in there and we're people pleasing and making everything easy for them, then we're enabling it to stay in the same cycle of things. They need
Hmm.
help, then we rescue, right?
Yeah.
But we really want to understand that people pleasing at the end of the day is not really healthy
Yeah.
way to lead.
Yeah.
It's actually being very counterproductive.
Yeah. 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 So important, on both ends and both
Yeah, it
sides of
is.
it, to be done in a healthy way, and oftentimes not easy to do, but
Yes,
vital.
that's very true.
Well, Brenda, I'd love to have like a quick, practical, maybe coaching moment here, live. I guess, there's maybe somebody who is listening to this, watching this, been listening to what we have to share, and
Yeah.
they themselves are someone who just feels maybe really stuck right now. We've been talking
Mm.
about adversity. Maybe it's someone who has been through a lot of painful experiences themselves. They wrestle a lot with trusting themselves. And maybe they're just, again, that paralyzed feeling. I feel like we've all felt of like, I don't know what the next step is. I don't know
Yeah.
what the next right thing to do is. I guess, how would you maybe guide them, begin helping them? What's like one small step that they could take today, this week, just towards clarity, towards healing, anything?
Sure. So if I was coaching somebody and I knew it was on trust, then the first question I would probably ask them is, where in your life do you feel trust is most difficult right now?
Mm,
Because that could be several different places. It could be people, it could be God, it could be future, it could be a decision that they're trying to make, right?
yeah. Yeah.
So that would be the first question I would
Yeah.
ask.
Okay. And once they've got that area maybe identified.
Yeah. And then I would be asking them, where is it in their thoughts that what are they telling themselves about that right now? Because I really want to hear if that's coming from a wounded place. So I need for them to share with me where they're experiencing the lack of trust.
Yeah.
And that's going to help get towards the core of it. And then I think the next question I'd probably ask them is, if trust was present, how would that make things different for them? Right? Because then it's going to start to shift them away, a different form of thinking. And of course, generally there's a few more questions I think I'd probably have in there if I was working back and forth with somebody.
Yeah.
And then I would ask them how it could look different and what kind of action we could take. And when you're coaching, you always want that action to come from them, not something that you're suggesting, but always something that is really meaningful for them, that they know that they can take steps forward in.
Yeah.
So I think that would be a few questions that I would ask on the front end of someone who's coming in.
Yeah, and that's so powerful, because the person we talk to the most is ourselves.
It is.
And it's so easy to stay stuck in our own thoughts, and spiral in our own whirlwind there. And so this is where, the work of having a coach, having somebody else to help with leading a process like this, I think is so helpful. But then it kind of does come full circle where, where that where the problem began internally, you have someone help lead and guide you back to where really the solution comes internally as well, from the individual themselves. So I think that's beautiful. And kind of beginning to wrap up here, coming to a close. I'm curious, Brenda Boose.
Oh boy.
What is you've shared so much insight, and you've navigated so much in your life, but I guess I'm curious, what is one thing that you are learning in this season of your life?
Yeah. One thing I'm learning in this season of life is releasing some of my expectations. I'm learning continually on asking God into those things, into those areas where I expect certain things. I don't know why I continue to do that, but it's really become a focus for me recently that really, when you expect certain things, you're going to get disappointed. And I'm also trying to do my very best to understand that, God's going to have an answer for those things.
Yeah.
Instead of what I'm, expecting, that his answer. And you would think over the years of the things that I have experienced that I would already have come to a place like this, but I am always a work in progress also. Right?
Yeah.
And I would love to walk with God in the freedom of not having things I might have expected like that to even surprise me. You know what I mean? That it's his plan, not my plan.
Yeah.
I think is really something that I've been working on.
That's
here
great.
lately.
I think it's important to note that there's a strong distinction between lowering your expectations and releasing your expectations.
Yeah.
I like that you said that a lot because I think some people could hear that and it turns into this like, you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like it's always negative. It's always,
Yeah.
you're just low, just expect the least, hope for the best,
Yeah.
expect the worst type of a thing. And I think that that can trap people as well. And so I love the beauty of like not lowering my expectations, but
Yeah.
releasing my expectations and placing
Yeah.
them in God's hands. I think that's
Yeah, for
great.
sure. Sure.
Um, well, on final thing here on your website, which I want to have you share in a minute so people can connect more with you.
Okay.
One of the phrases that you have on there is that you're stronger than you realize.
Yes.
And so, for the person who maybe doesn't feel very strong right now as we're closing out,
Mm.
what would you want them to know?
Oh gosh, I'd want them to know that they continue to be very usable. Okay, that they are stronger than what they can ever imagine. I know that after having lived it, that a lot of times we can feel very weak, and we can feel like those things disqualify us for what God holds for us. But it does not ever disqualify us for all that God has for us, that He has a purpose, and they should be encouraged to know that God is working in and through them in the places where they may not feel strong.
Yeah.
That He has a plan for what they're going through that might be making them feel weak at this point.
Yeah.
But I often like to tell my clients that, there's seasons. We go through different seasons where we feel strong and then we feel weak and
Yeah.
that we're challenged. So if they're feeling particularly weak or they're not feeling that strong, then it is a season of time. And I would get curious. I would pause and get curious and invite God into that. And ask Him and seek from Him what it is He's wanting you to discern and get from the season that you're in.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, a lot of power is if we just yield that over to God and we give those things to Him.
Yeah.
He will show us if we're open to it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And kind of closes us out perfectly here because that is kind of, somewhat the whole idea really behind, the leadership press is the
Yeah.
idea that, and again, like say it every time, pressure is the thing, that produces purpose, produces the oil. And oftentimes we see, we feel weak, but
Yeah.
weakness is actually a sign that it's working.
Yeah, that's great.
You know, I worked out this morning, and it's like I'm afterwards, like I feel weak, like I don't feel
Yeah.
strong. I'm exhausted. I'm tired, but that's actually a sign that there's something greater growing within me. And so, just that reminder this morning that just because you feel weak doesn't mean you're
Yeah,
not getting stronger.
that's
So
right.
beautiful.
100%.
Well, Brenda B, where
Yeah.
can people connect with you? Where can they maybe learn a little bit more about you and your coaching?
Yeah, if they like to check me out, they can find me at brendaboose.com. It's real simple. Would love for them to come and check out and reach out if they
Awesome.
have a need. Would love that.
So great. Well, Brenda B, thank you so much again for
Yeah,
sharing your story, your insights, your wisdom with us. I'm so thankful for you, so grateful for you, so grateful to have you in my circle, in my life. I'm better for it. and believing that
Likewise.
our community is going to grow and be better for having heard this conversation. So thanks again for being here. Grateful for you. And
Yeah.
if you are watching, listening, would love for you to share this with a leader, to share this with somebody who you feel like maybe would have an impact on. Always helps us when you share this content. But thanks again for listening and joining us today on another episode of the Leadership Press podcast. We'll see you next month.